Unfinished games that are getting released. I think this is something that we have unfortunately been seeing a lot more of recently, or at least it would definitely seem that way. I definitely know that once upon a time, games were absolutely finished projects when they would get released. I mean, don't get me wrong, you had a few bad eggs here and there. I mean, we've all had some games that we've played that had, several glitches in them. But for the most part, I mean, especially in like the early 2000s, games weren't supported by anything online. There were no post-launch updates. Nothing like that, so what you got on release day, what you paid $60 for was just the product that you got. So obviously game developers, game publishers, they actually put out polished products, but it would seem that today that is not the case. These products, so to speak, are not polished at all. It would seem that devs, or maybe especially publishers, are really relying on updates post-launch to support their games. They are fine with releasing these games that are not finished at all just to make money, as quick as possible. Now, I guess I'm out of the loop because apparently this was the case for Cities Skylines 2. This was a game that was released just last year in October. Actually, come to think of it, yeah, it's been out for about a year now. I mean, I remember hearing about this game, but I didn't really know anything about it other than I'm assuming it's kind of like a Sim City type of game. But apparently this game had quite a disastrous launch. It was riddled with just a ton of bugs and glitches, I guess, and it kind of got review bombed on Steam. Now, the developer is Colossal Order, but the publisher is Paradox Interactive, and I want to point out the publisher here, because as I said before, I think it's actually way more apparent that it's these publishers that are pushing out these incomplete projects. It's not really the developers, they're just working on the game. They don't really control, well, when it's published. That would be the publishers that control that. So yeah, the game was released. It had a pretty bad launch. 1 year later, I don't think it has really done enough to win over everybody, kind of like Cyberpunk did post-launch eventually. It's still received, I believe, as, a quite incomplete product. So like I said, the publisher is Paradox Interactive. That's the publisher of Cities Skylines 2. So the deputy CEO of Paradox, named Mattias Lilja, was actually interviewed just recently by somebody with Rock Paper Shotgun. That's a big game news, game journalist website. And Mattias was talking about the new game that's going to be coming out soon called Prison Architect 2 that is going to be published by Paradox. It looks like this is a sequel to the 2017 Prison Architect game, and it looks like it was about 2 months ago actually that this game was delayed. Now, Mattias touched on why this is, and it actually has a lot to do with the reception of Cities Skylines 2 and kind of this whole idea of shipping an incomplete game. Basically, he said that Paradox has very much learned from the disaster that was Cities Skylines 2, mainly the launch. It kind of sounds like Paradox really underestimated the negative reaction that their fans would have from shipping this game that had a lot of bugs and a lot of glitches in it. And most notably, he said that this has taught them that gamers are not basically going to just sit around all day and wait for the game to be fixed. The patience is not as big as maybe they once thought. He said that they have realized that gamers have higher expectations than they thought. He actually attributed some of this to the economy, like people have less money, I guess, to spend on games, so they're going to spend it wisely. I thought this was kind of an interesting take. I think it mainly has to do, in my opinion, from just a lot of these games that have been shipped that are incomplete. I think a lot of people are just fed up with it. I don't think it has as much to do with the economy and, limited budgets, but hey, maybe I'm wrong. Nonetheless, though, this has apparently contributed to Paradox's decision to delay this game that they saw as very much incomplete. And I think this says a lot about their MO going forward, and hopefully this rubs off on other publishers. He said, quote, "It's all based on the fact that we, in all transparency, see that fans right now, with a squeezed budget for games, have higher expectations and are less accepting that you will fix things over time." That was the main quote that stuck out to me. Again, I don't really know if I agree necessarily with the whole budget statement, but I definitely agree that it would seem gamers are less accepting and less trusting of publishers and developers to fix things over time. Look, at the end of the day, there are a lot of games out there. I mean, there's a lot of forms of media out there. Obviously, there's also movies, TV shows, music, whatever. But even just focusing on video games, there are tons of video games. Literally hundreds of huge video games come out every year. And obviously, it's impossible to play them all. So you're not going to just sit around and wait for a game that you've had your eye on for a while to fix itself when you get to launch day and you realize that it's, totally not finished. Again, I'm not going to blame the devs for this. The developers are just making the game. I really want to put the spotlight on the publisher. publishers. I'm very happy that it would seem that a fairly big publisher, Paradox, is now realizing that gamers, well, they want complete games on day one. And like I said, hopefully, and I'm thinking it will, but hopefully this will rub off on other publishers as well.